Good afternoon, everyone. I've got the pleasure today to have Ivan McAdam with me for the latest episode of Let's Grow Young. Ivan, welcome.
Thanks, Sanj. I'm excited to be here.
No worries, good to have you. It's quite interesting because I've kind of got bored of my own episodes over the last couple of episodes, if I'm honest with you. They've become very scientific and going into the science of aging, medication, lifestyle pillars. And now I want to get back to talking about inspirational stories and inspirational people. So we will come back to all the science stuff in future episodes, but today's focus is really for us and the viewers to hear your story. There's absolutely no point in me going through what I've read about you and watched about you. It's better if it just comes from you. What our headline is that Ivan's kind of motto or headline is live big, break free. And so, Ivan, why don't you take that as a cue to tell us who you are and what live big, break free means?
Yeah, thank you, Sanj. And you've had a really amazing group of guests and big, big shoes to fill with inspirational stories. But um, for me, I guess I was a little bit lost. I came to a point in my life where I was looking for there must be more. There must be something more to this than what I was stuck in that the corporate rat race. And I went on an adventure. I went on a journey, and on that journey, I discovered that, um, actually there is a lot more to life. That if you take that step, if you make that leap, that you can live big, you can break free. And it was a bit of a revelation to me, Everyone around me had told me you had to live a certain way, and it seemed like that was the standard life path, and it was very scary to step off that. But it wasn't as difficult or scary as I expected it to be. So I got passionate about trying to share that story, share that news with other people, because all around me I knew other dads, other middle-aged guys, other professionals who were feeling the same way, but feeling they were stuck and there was no choice but to swallow it down and go to the office and do your best every day. But I think I discovered there's a better way, there's an alternative way, and for the brave and the bold, you really can live big, you really can break free, and it can be a much more exciting, much richer life.
Okay. So talk to me about what your life used to be. So I mean your corporate life. Talk to me about the type of employment you were in, the type of work, the pressures you faced, your routines that you had in your corporate world.
So I worked with a big global bank. I joined. I was a teacher for a brief while and struggled with the financial constraints of that, and decided to join a big financial institution on the grad program and was posted around the world. So I worked across four different markets for a big global bank and was very successful. I was very fortunate. Um, but there's a certain lifestyle that goes with that. I always remember, turning up in Kuala Lumpur, first day reporting to work after leaving the graduate training, and you know, sitting there jet lagged, not used to the heat and the differences, and looking around at 6 o'clock and thinking, okay, so I've made it through my first day, but nobody moved, nobody went anywhere. And I was thinking, well, what's going on? And then at 8 o'clock, people came around and they said, "You want me to, dabao back food for you for dinner?" And I was like, "Oh my God, this is looking bad. They're getting in food now, so nobody's going home." And I think that night I arrived home at about 10 or 10:30 back to my apartment. I gobbled down some cereal and went to bed. And I kind of lived that life again for the next 10 years. That was me. Monday to Friday, my job owned me. But as you become older, I did manage to settle down. I had a daughter, and that started to really feel like a sacrifice. That time away, that prioritization of life. I remember a big, in a holiday I had arranged. My parents always dreamed of going to Australia, and I decided I was going to take them, and we headed off. And a week before, I was given this big new role at work. It was a great achievement. I was really pleased with myself. But sort of taking over in the midst of a crisis. Suddenly, all these people from Hong Kong and London were calling me up, and what's going on? What's happening with this? And this is unacceptable. Must fix this. And I remember, trying to put on a brave face and like leaving the beach to go and take a phone call and being all stressed and nearly driving off the road a few times, dialing into conference calls. And then at the end of the day, everyone else would go to sleep and I would log into the laptop and try and catch up on everything, sleep a few hours. And it just was, I wasn't good company. It wasn't a good trip. And actually, sadly, we all decided it wasn't much fun and we decided we'd go home early. So that really made me think, you're trying to balance that. I always describe it as you're trying to be a good husband, you're trying to be a good son, you're trying to be a good father, and you're also, trying to be a good employee. But it seems that the modern world or these corporate careers, they don't really make it easy for you to be all of those four things at the same time. Somebody has to suffer. And at that point, I think looking at my life, I was thinking, well, I wasn't the dad I wanted to be. I wasn't the son I wanted to be. I wasn't the husband I wanted to be. And to be honest, my job didn't even think I was that perfect either. So I was thinking, well, what's the point of all this? So I think some of those journeys started to shape a different perspective, and we started to think about something different.
So, Ivan, just remind me when all this was taking place. I think you were a COO for, shall we call it, one of the biggest banks around. Did it occur at the time you became a COO?
Well, I don't, that particular story is about 6 years ago now, 7 years ago. I think there were a couple of, points on the journey. I think maybe it was a 5 or 10 year journey of wondering about life. My wife and I, we lost a child late in the pregnancy, and that was, you know, I was at every maternity appointment, and I missed that one because I can't remember what the emergency was, but it was so important I couldn't be there, and that turned out to be the one where the very bad news and the big surprise, and that again, was just some sort of signal to me that priorities, time, and what really matters to you, and as you play the game in these big banks and these big organizations, you see people are not really the main priority.
Sorry, Ivan. What game? So when you play the game in these big banks and societies, conscious that I probably know what those games is, but some of our viewers may not.
Yeah, I suppose there's politics in any big organization, and everybody's trying to compete for the promotion and the next job, and get their way. These are pyramids, right? Everyone's trying to climb up the slippery corporate ladder, and sometimes you have to be a little bit pointy elbows on that journey. And very often in my career, I was the guy who they would ask to implement a head redundancy program or optimization, or these different words that the corporates use. And so you'd see these people that maybe 6 months earlier, you say, okay, I've got a really tough job for you. Can you help me out? Can you go in and sort it out? And then 6 months later, you're saying, well, you're not performing. And they say, well, you sent me in here to do this, in this tough position.
Horror.
You said I was a star.
Shock horror. That kind of stuff happens as well.
So you realize that, people are just a piece in a cog in a machine, and it can be bad luck, and things can happen. So you realize, gosh, I mean, there's so many bad stories. I left my honeymoon early, this kind of nonsense, right? My boss left his role, and I wanted to take over, and suddenly I said, I got to get back, and I wonder what crazy nonsense I was thinking now, but I left my honeymoon trip early to rush back to the office, and didn't get the promotion in the end, right? So this is the kind of nonsense that you end up doing. But so there was that kind of a journey. So me and my wife, we started to dream. We started to think. We'd have a bottle of wine at the end of the day sometimes, and
was that every day? Was that every day?
There was a time where it was every day, yeah. I'm glad to say these days it's not. But yeah, I don't think I've left the big corporate job and that world for about 3 or 4 years, and yeah, so life feels a lot more healthy and balanced now. But yeah, you sort of anesthetize for that stress. People feel that they're getting so much, but they're also having to give so much as well. And we used to dream that, what we could do something else, right? We don't have to do this. What could we do if we? I think we had the dream for a while that we were going to set up a little hostel, and we were going to sit around and drink wine with the guests every evening, and have an easy life. Probably
Wine
wise that
is
we didn't go
becoming a
down that
theme,
path.
Ivan. What wine is becoming a theme here?
um, I don't think, yeah, I wouldn't want to give the wrong impression of me, but yeah, I've changed my ways now. But there's still the odd drink. But as you get older, you maybe it affects you a bit more.
Yeah. So earlier you said that these pressures, these conflicts, these politics have been going on for 5 to 10 years. And what kind of effect was this having on you emotionally? And so, being more specific about this and relating back to my own experience, where you begin to feel a dissonance between the way you are being treated, some of the things you've been asked to do, eh, compared to your own personal values.
Yeah, I think there's as when you're young and I felt I was very idealistic, very committed, very passionate. And I'd be the person pushing hard, we got to do it this way, we got to do it right, we got to achieve. And then as you become the boss and the leader, you meet the people like you, and you're telling them it's okay, calm down, don't worry, don't push so hard, don't stress. There certainly was a change, some of the things I did and had to. Middle management is a tough place to be because you're not actually the final call to decide, but you must go out there in front of the 100 or 200, 300 troops and say, this is the best thing to do. We must do it, and it's a great idea. Even if you don't entirely believe in it yourself, that's a dissonant position. That's a painful position. But I think there was there was the meaning of it all, there was the stress and the sacrifice. So, I've always been a very calm person. I think that was one of my strengths in the journey. But there were points in this journey when I was pushing hard and trying to climb up the ladder, where I would start to feel those palpitations in your chest, and you could feel the stress. That period taking on the COO role at the beginning, around that time of that holiday, certainly there was a lot of pressure and difficulties, and so I felt that was obviously no way to live your life. That this was damaging you. I remember one business trip I did. I was heading off and trying to get everything done, and just as I was heading to the airport, my wrist stopped working on my right hand, and I kept going for 2 months, or sorry, 2 weeks traveling
Your
around.
what? Your wrist.
My wrist, yeah, it just seized up, like the carpal tunnel syndrome kind of thing, and couldn't carry the luggage with that hand, couldn't type, couldn't write anything. And one of the colleagues had pity on me in Dusseldorf and sent me to some doctor who said, I think I was only 30 something, and he said, "Oh, you have horrible arthritis. I can't believe this arm is working." And I was thinking, geez, this is a signal, maybe you're pushing it a bit too hard here. So yeah, I definitely got the warnings. I guess you know that you've been down that road yourself, Sanj, and I guess I just thank myself lucky that I listened to the warnings. I guess both of us maybe are on the same path on that, because we know colleagues. Two of my bosses collapsed in the office, and we called ambulances, right? This this sort of stuff is not supposed to happen, really, right? But not that I want to make it out to be, Wolf of Wall Street or anything like that. It wasn't so dramatic and exciting all the time. But yeah, the lifestyle is much healthier now, I'm glad to say.
Okay, and we're going to come on to that lifestyle, but and apologies. I just want to delve in a bit more about the corporate world because, funnily enough, since my story went public, and I'll tell you the story about that one day. I never intended the story to go in front of 11 million people. Um, I've got a bunch of bankers who have put meetings in my diary to basically have one-to-ones with them, which is why I'm delving into this a little bit. How did you feel? How were your energy levels? Could you feel that your body was responding to disappointments in the corporate world? So I faced a number of disappointments, right? And I believe I delivered pretty complex programs, pretty important programs, saving the organizations where I worked. How did you feel? I know how I felt when on the other side of a camera or face to face, the person in front of you is trying to justify a decision that they've made, which kind of is a slap in the face for the work that you've done. And you can almost tell that they're struggling because they themselves don't believe it. What kind of just describe to me the physical and emotional feelings you were getting when these sort of things were going on?
I think it sounds weird and sounds strange, but these corporate structures, and if you join as a graduate and you're dropped into the organization and dipped around different roles, you become a little bit indoctrinated or socialized. There's almost a love or sort of loyalty to the organization and the brand. And if you're doing this kind of thing where you're working 12, 14 hours a day, working on your holidays, pushing hard all the time, it's a feeling of betrayal. It's a feeling of sort of almost like a loved one breaking your heart when these situations come. And of course you have to be realistic and you have to be mature about it. But in the moment, it's hard to be those things. Also, I suppose, I've had the journey where if you've had a good path and you've had a good career, you tend to get more yeses than nos. So the nos come, or the surprises come as a bit of a surprise when they come at you. You've had a good run for a couple of years and then suddenly you don't. So there's a sort of a grief, shock, denial, anger stages that you go through.
What
But
happened
it's
to
just
your
a way
body
of
when you
like,
were grieving?
why?
So what happened to your body when you were grieving? And so I'm the person delivering the bad news, right? I've been sitting there expecting good news. Um, could you feel a sweatiness? Could you feel some palpitations? Could you feel something in your stomach? Were you holding back from swearing? How was this playing out with you?
I describe it kind of quite like a fight or flight,
Yeah.
and then I think my reaction is sort of a freezing, a massive tenseness. Um, Corporate world rewards control, right? I did internships in an investment bank. I remember before I joined the institution that I spent a lot of time, and I saw screaming and shouting. But in the institution I was in, keeping a stiff upper lip and keeping it professional was valued. So I would sort of tense up. My mind would spin. Hey, is there anything I can do to turn this around? And there's a part of I would always recall the logical part of my brain is telling me it's done, right? They decided this a month ago or a week ago. They're only telling you now. But another childish or emotional part of my mind would be scrambling. What if I did this? What if I did that? But what about this? Did you think about that? Um, it's a little bit like your sort of tunnel vision. Your peripheral is fading out, and you're not sort of your mind is
Mm.
moving into a different location, and you're trying to think, how do I process this? Often I remember you're thinking, how do I go home to my wife or my loved one and say, oh yeah, sorry, I've been telling you I had to work, super late for the last 9 months to prove that I was going to get this, and now I didn't get it. So I suppose your mind does go to what matters.
Did you feel like you failed them?
Yeah, embarrassed that just a fool for sacrificing so much when it sometimes in that moment you can realize maybe it was an illusion all along. That's when suddenly you realize it's the favored candidate they already, that they had all along, and you were futilely killing yourself trying to prove that you were the right candidate or not. But I mean, the situations are always different. But
Yeah.
yeah, you do feel that you've let them down, or that you've been a fool for sacrificing that what really mattered for what maybe turned out not to matter.
Okay. Okay. Um, and I'm sorry just to keep going into these examples and push back on me if I'm going into it too much. Ivan, your wife was going through a medical emergency, right? And you also had your honeymoon, um, and you left for work. When the news was kind of broken, if that's how it was, that you haven't got your promotion or you haven't got the right compensation raise or whatever it was, what impact did this have on your relationship? What impact did this have at home? How did that dynamic change, if at all?
I mean, my wife was always very supportive, understanding. I think she was wisely remind me in those moments that, does this all matter so much? Do you care too much? Do you try too much? Is this the right way to live your life? Um, of course, that's not really what you want to hear in that moment, but those lessons did stick with me. Um, and I think over time I took them to heart. That that mirror that she would hold up, that maybe the denial is easier to maintain if it's just you. Next time, um, but if another person asking those questions, prodding you with those truths and facts of the situation, um, she has never held it against me, because I guess she feels like I turned good in the end.
Amazing.
But yeah, I have a lot to thank her for. I think she's probably the inspiration for the change in direction.
Absolutely amazing. And my last question on the previous Ivan is, when you had these disappointments at work, and this is coming from my own personal experience at work, um, how supportive did you find your peers? How supportive did you find the teams that you were building when you faced disappointment and you didn't get what you want?
I think there's in these big organizations, there's plenty of moaning and groaning. Um, my experience is a lot of, you go for drinks, or you go for the drinks again, but you go for lunch, and you sit around and moan and complain, and why me, and not fair, and so on. I read a good book, and a line that's always stuck with me is, to who you give the blame, you give the power. And for many
That's
years
amazing.
I indulged in that a lot. I would moan. I guess actually one of the worst things I used to do is I would, as I was going home every night, I would run through my mind all the unfairness of it all, or the why it didn't work out this way, or why that person should have done it this way instead of that way. And now I just think that, yeah, that this was all a sort of a mental ill health, that I was living, that it's no good to do that. So certainly there was plenty of people who would commiserate with me, and plenty of people who would find everyone to blame. But I mean, ultimately, I say that, know the game you're playing, right? That's the truth, right? I don't blame the system. I'm very grateful for all of that I got out of it, and I was very fortunate. Just don't be, the question I tell people is, just don't be, if the system tells you what it's like, then don't ignore that, right? That is what it is. People are not the most important thing, and their life is not the most important thing. There's a business that wants to be run.
Yeah.
Um, so so I just think that, I deal in truths now. I like to try to see things as they are, and make my decisions around that. Well, what life do I want to live? And the choice I decided to make was that I wanted to live a life based on what mattered to me, not living my life for someone else's approval. Um, this corporate game is a continuation of that schooling socialization where you're running hard to win some prize or some ribbon, right? And I see my peers all the time, 40 or 50 years of age, they still haven't realized that the ribbons don't matter. The prizes aren't worth that much anymore. But the lifetime of training or socialization that we must get the next prize, we must get the next prize. They can't turn that off, even when the prizes don't matter anymore or the sacrifices don't make sense.
Have you obviously heard of the Maslow hierarchy of needs? Right,
Yeah.
and I think most people have heard of it, but essentially it begins with you start off with your basic needs and requirements in life, i.e., food, shelter, security, and that stuff, and then lower down comes the more hedonic stuff, which is bigger house, flashier car, Rolex watches, 5-star holidays. I sometimes feel that when I reflect on what was going on with me, I had somehow flipped or inverted that hierarchy of needs, and so I started running for those things that really didn't matter, and I'd lost the realization that actually having a fairly decent house, having a good dynamic at home, having good relationships was actually all I need. Everything else will fall in place, and I often wonder if why have you and I been able to see this, although mine was forced onto me, and others, including colleagues of mine who are still working at some of these great institutions. Why can't they see it? And their external body language will tell you that they're not right. Something's up with them. I get messages all the time. I got a message today from someone saying, "Sanj, you're being an inspiration to people who are still stuck," right? And so I wonder what organisations have to do to help people notice it, to help people thrive. I do still work in corporate, but I work in corporate now where it's very different. Sorry, I'm being very long-winded because this is a very passionate subject to me. Do you think people just block it off? Do you think people know that they're feeling under stress and feeling under pressure, but they just don't have the coping mechanisms or the ability to step back? And this, I think, will be a good segue into the next session of this interview, which is, well, ultimately, Ivan, how do you break free? How did you break free? And how do you guide other people to live big and break free?
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting point, Sanj. Because as you were talking, I was thinking that, on this treadmill, actually, I recall that I wouldn't eat, right, for 12 hours, 14 hours. I would eat breakfast and I would eat before I went to sleep. And I ate nothing in between. And I remember, many times you wouldn't even go to the toilet, right? There'd be no chance to even break out of the endless meetings or deadlines. So actually, yeah, the basic human needs were being subsumed to some bigger,
What the
twisted,
basic human
backward.
needs of even having to go for a dump will be.
Yeah, yeah. I find it funny now, but it was a life that I lived for many many years, robotically. But yeah, I think the same question as you, right? Why is it that we don't take the signals? Why don't we change? Why don't we do it? I spend a lot of time talking to people and working with people, and people reach out to me for help on that journey. I think partly it's about I thought a lot about this writing my book. Why and how do you do it? Um, if you feel too trapped, and you mentioned the word coping mechanism, well, then the coping mechanism is to swallow it or to ignore it or to, try to drink a lot, or, I describe that many of the people I know are sort of anesthetizing um, the frustration that they feel. You know, luxury holidays in the most expensive resort for a week, all inclusive, so that they feel it was worth it, right? But they don't. If you think there's no alternative, then they're too scared to even consider any other possible reality. So I teach, and I shared in my book that that I think you really have to start to build a pathway towards this, right? If you're going to try to make a change in direction and change your life like this, you can't just turn around and do it tomorrow. You have to sort of prepare yourself financially and your mindset. Um, you've got to open up your mind, and then you've got to build some contingencies and some alternatives, and then prepare and get yourself in a place where you get the confidence to do it.
Mm.
I know that most people that I talk to, they feel it's just impossible. It cannot be done, and it's the financial that they focus upon. It's the money, right? They have got themselves in a situation where they feel it's absolutely impossible. I couldn't live without this big salary. And it becomes, as you get into your middle age and your energy and enthusiasm is not what it was when you were 20, and you're highly paid, and there's the young people snapping at your heels trying to take your job from you. It becomes a quite scary and precarious place to be. You've got the mortgage, you've got the elderly parents, you've got the kids going to university or private school, and most of these people I talk to, they just assume that there's absolutely no way. I must just swallow it, close my eyes, and just keep going. Those are the saddest situations, because you see those people and they are sort of going through the motions. Their passion and enthusiasm is gone. They're playing life in safe. They're terrified that they would ever get made redundant or kicked out, because they're worried about what that might mean. But there
What
is a
about those
path,
guys?
an achievable.
What about those guys who are there, who sit for decades waiting for the redundancy? You've seen them, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a logical position, and I don't know. In some ways, those people, if they've checked out and they're no longer working the crazy hours and they're no longer sacrificing their family life, I mean, I think in some ways that's a logical accommodation that you can make, right? There are, I don't say that this is, there's not everybody. There are some people who can do it, and they can have a good balance in their life, and they have the right mindset, and it can work for them. These guys who are waiting for the redundancy, I mean, yeah, I've had moments in my career, or times in my career, where I was coasting, and I've always found those to be the most toxic or destructive times, where you're sort of, that you should be doing something, that you should be using your mind, and you're not. So I do pity the people who are doing that. You know, do something about it. Make sure you get yourself made redundant, but don't just sit around, waiting for it to happen for years, because,
Yeah,
you know, our, I've now realized time is our greatest asset.
yeah,
Time is precious. We live our life thinking that money is limited, and that time is unlimited, but it's absolutely the opposite. Time is limited. No matter, nobody can do anything and get any more. Nobody, the richest, the poorest, none of us get any more time. But, the Fed can print $5 trillion, in a year if it wants, right? So money is unlimited. It doesn't feel like that, but we should always remember that time is our greatest asset. So though, people can retreat into living a comfortable or routine or safe life, and that's where I think we meet many people that they have become comfortable, and comfort is a dangerous place. Um, but life it should be lived full. That's why I said live big, break free, because I think life is such a precious thing, and each of us only have so much time that the worst thing you can possibly ever do is sit there and let the clock, tick out.
yeah.
We were meant for much more than that. We have much more in us than that, and that's just such a small way to live your life instead of a big way to live your life, in my opinion.
Okay. Ivan, what was the moment that made you break free? And then when did this happen? I know there were multiple traumas with a small t along the journey, but what was the moment where you just said enough? And then how did you go about executing becoming free?
Yeah, it's hard to pick a moment. The traumas are the motivation, and then the moment where you start to break free is when you start to reprogram your mind. If I was to pick a moment, I remember I downloaded onto my phone this app that was going to track my expenses. Because you have this lifestyle creep, right? You get a promotion and you spend more. I remember when I was a teacher, I spent £10 on my shirt. When I was a banker, I spent £100 on my shirt. So, you think you're richer, but you're just spending more.
Was it those
I tried
super
to, I,
tight shirts or was it those super tight shirts where people are just flexing their biceps?
I wish, but I was trying anyway. So I downloaded this app and I started to record everything that I spent. And I think after a couple of months, I looked at the app and I was like, I don't know if I should curse here on this podcast, but I was like, oh my God, what am what am I doing, right? Where's this money disappearing? And I think I saw something like we'd spent $10,000 on restaurants or something, and I was like, oh my God, what are we doing, right? What is going on, And there was, you'd go out for these nights out on Friday or Saturday night, and most people had a young baby at home, and everybody's working damn hard, and everybody's got a decent salary, and of course somebody's ordering expensive drinks, and the bill comes at the end, and you think, oh my God, what the heck are we doing? Why? So I think that was kind of the moment, because then I realized actually I could dial back, right? And me and my wife, we came to a good, we had a meeting of minds, and we quickly realized that we could actually start saving a significant portion of the money we were making instead of blowing it on stuff that we didn't even need or appreciate. And that, I think, was the moment I started to think, actually, maybe I could start to buy back my own time. And then I went on the journey of putting that in place, a plan around how I would do that. But I think that, hard to pick one number, because for me it really was a journey and a roadmap. But that's
Okay.
one moment.
Okay, but talk to me about then when you actually gave up your corporate role. So what process did you go through? Had you already lined up an alternative source of income and an alternative employment, etc., or was it big bang, I'm off?
Yeah, so for me it was big bang. I don't recommend that to people now. I recommend a smarter approach of preparing things and building things differently. But to me, I guess I was all in, or I was all out. That was sort of how my personality was and how I'd evolved. So I wrote it to the end. I had a freedom number. I had a number that I thought if I could save up this amount of money, and if I could get this right and that right, then it would be enough that I could take care of the basics, the core expenses for the family, and therefore I would no longer need to work just for the money. I could then do what I wanted to do. And of course, after 16 years in a corporate career and working pretty damn hard, what I wanted to do at that point in time was to take a break and to travel and to I guess rebalance. I felt like I had a deficit of living and life, and owed my parents and owed my daughter and owed my wife more of my time and my focus. So I coming up to that point, I was chasing a number. Then this restructuring came out of the blue, as it does in the corporate world, and suddenly there was the opportunity to, go through the restructuring and, reapply for a different position and so on and so on, and maybe take a sideways move, or you could take the package. And that turned out that package was the gap between that where I was and the number I wanted was a little bit close to that package. So I think that was the nudge that life was giving me. That then it was pretty hard to say, well, you said you want this, you said you wanted it, are you going to burn your ship now, right? There's no excuse. You said if you got to this point, you would do it, and this is the opportunity. So
Do you think? Do you
I
think?
I
So
did.
sorry. Do you think that was purely coincidental that the restructuring came along? Because there's a saying that I never used to believe,
Yeah.
but I really do believe in it. That once you start changing your perspective of the world and you get more positive, then the universe starts working for you, right?
Yeah, I would have thought you were crazy 4 or 5 years ago. But on this journey, it's been exactly like that, Sanj, right? I can tell you so many examples where it's worked out like that. And in a way, yeah, I think now looking back, you know, I when you say the words out loud, it's a bit silly, but we did this dream poster and we bravely stuck it on the inside of our wardrobe so no one would ever see it. If anyone came to our house or anything. But when we opened up the wardrobes, we had put the dream there of what we were aiming for, what we wanted to do, the lifestyle we wanted. We put it up on our. We saw it every day, and we had said it to each other. We'd made that pact, and I guess
What's
yeah,
on the
in a way,
poster? What's on the poster? Can you describe what's on the poster? In fact, with hindsight, we should have stuck it on your fridge at the back.
yeah, when it came to writing my book, it was, I did a workshop and they said, tell everybody you're writing a book because then they'll make you write the book. Nobody in the world wants to actually sit down and write a proper book, but so I told a bunch of
Yes.
people and then I had to write
So,
the
so
book.
what
So
was on the poster?
on the poster, we had put the life that we wanted to lead, right? What it meant. I think there was a picture of that hostel or that guest house that Airbnb we were gonna run, and us sitting out there with our cool traveler guests and enjoying a glass of wine with them in the
Here we
evening.
go. Wine again. Wine again.
um, so there was that. There was a lot of traveling. There was family time. There was reading. There was exercise. This there was when we did this sort of mapping of what mattered to us, what made us feel alive, what was our best selves, and we had put that there, and we had put the dream number or the freedom number that we were aiming for, and how many years it was going to take to get there, and what it needed to get there. So um yeah, I mean, my wife had even cut out some pictures from a magazine, and it was cute craft stuff. But yeah, whatever it needed to be, it got us there. So I respect it.
Excellent. So you were manifesting with an action plan, basically.
Yeah, now I'm much more clear and I sort of have a much more formulaic approach to it. But yes, we stumbled upon through trial and error a plan and a structure that did work for us. So I always say it took us sort of 7, 8 years to do it. But I think people, learning from what I've learned now, I tell people that many times, you can do it depending on your circumstances, many people can do it in 2 or 3 years.
Okay. So your social media stuff, it talks about being a freedom lifestyle designer. I think again, this is a good segue to come into that. If you were to have a client having similar corporate type of issues, what is the framework that you would take them through to design their freedom life?
So, in the book, I start with the mindset, and I always start with the mindset as well. We have to reprogram the mindset a little bit, that there are more paths in life than just the standard corporate path that people are used to. And that there are, you know, a job is not the only way to make money. A job is not the only way. Selling your time for money every month is a short-term trade. There are other ways you can trade in the world, and there are other ways you can build things. Um, there's certainly a reprogramming and a new strategy for life, a new approach to life. The whole idea of lifestyle freedom is always lifestyle design is always quite interesting, I think, for many people. That actually, if you don't start with, okay, this is the life I have now and the job I have, and okay, I'll make the best of it. But what if you started with the blank sheet of paper of what is the life I wanted to live? And then I design my life around that. Because actually, if you're flexible on some of the inputs, if you're flexible on location, or if you're flexible on around time, or if you're flexible on the point in which you're going to make the move, then you can actually find you can usually find a way to live the lifestyle that you wanted to live. Um, so I definitely focus on that. I tell people to think differently. Also focus on the why. What is it that you really want to do? So before you this is a hard journey, right? And you're going to get demotivated, you're going to find challenges along the way. I always find that people have to get excited about the new life they're running towards in order for them to break through the inertia, overcome the challenges and bumps along the way. So I start as well by asking people to reconnect with what was it that what was it that used to light them up before they this became dulled or sort of, subdued among their corporate training. If you can get excited about the possibilities of life again and excited about what you could be doing, then that's the motivation you're going to need to actually make a change in your life, to make changes in your how you're living, and the bravery to make that leap in the end, because it's always going to need that leap. There'll always be a reason to wait. There'll always be it's not a good time. But I haven't found anyone who's regretted it so far.
Okay. I was smiling at the way you said corporate life subdues your whatever you were excited about in the past. That's really damning, isn't it? It's really damning. Corporate life can subdue your excitement of life. That is pretty damning, but very accurate. And I think it kind of sorry, I think that framework is brilliant. It's very similar to a framework which I implement, but it also talks to what I call trying to kind of deviate your reality. And so I think a lot of people think they can only be on one path, and that path may be going like this, which is a corporate path. But not everyone is born into being, born with a silver spoon and can suddenly stop that path and say, well, I'm going to invest X to build Y and suddenly take another path. The journey that I find myself on is actually bending that reality. So you're actually on a path here, but trying to bend it through my passion and doing other things. But you can be on both paths. You just have to, you can have a foot in each path. But I think mentally, you have to work out how to deal with the emotions of your historical path and how they affect you, so that you can actually spend sufficient time on the alternative path. And that's what I'm finding has been the biggest learning for me, that you can have such paths, and I think your framework really talks to that. What do you do now then, Ivan? What do you do now? I mean, surely you're not just prancing around different countries, drinking wine in different vineyards, and just chilling out and building your house. You must have re-engineered a life to kind of bring your purpose, your values closer to how you actually make money now. So, what do you do now to to, 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 to to provide for the family, to provide for yourself, and to build to this vision of your retreat?
Well, what interestingly happened is that when you no longer do things just for the money, you start to do them because you're interested in them, because you're excited about them, because you're passionate about them. Actually, the world starts to come and meet you and want to engage and want to I guess I would describe what I have now as a portfolio career. I I have switched from selling my time for a monthly salary to exploring a portfolio of different things, which some give me short-term income, some give me medium-term, returns and payoffs. I certainly find it to be a much more interesting life, a much more full life. It's not as financially remunerative as the old life necessarily. Maybe over time that can balance out, but it's a better life. So what do I actually do? Well, I discovered that I could take the experience and ideas and insights that I'd gained in that corporate career, and I could actually sell them back to corporate consultancy firms, to service providers, and so on, who wanted to know about how do banks work and how do they operate and what's it like inside, and could you help us to understand, so we could pitch them products, etc. So that's as an industry expert. So I was traveling around the world for 18 months with my family, and we discovered that I could do one call with a McKinsey or a Bain for 60 minutes, and that would be enough money for our family to have a great adventure in Tbilisi, Georgia for a week, and we could live a good life like that. So that was an interesting sort of hack that people, geo arbitrage plus, selling your own expertise on your own terms. So I do that. I sort of describe that as Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week. 4 hours of calls pays for my rent and my basic expenses. Um, I also have my book and my coaching practice. That's something that I do for a passion, but also, there's some income comes in through that. I have some companies that I advise, and some companies that pay me a sort of small retainer or advisory to support. And then I have longer term plays. I've started a number of businesses that's satisfying and stimulating and a learning journey for me. They don't pay me anything, but I am I'm building something that may be worth something in the future. I have become a sort of an investor, so I realized that a lot of startups would, I couldn't do what they did as tech startups, but they also couldn't do what I do. They can't scale things. They don't understand regulation. They don't understand fundraising, storytelling, etc. So I have an equity in those startups that I work with, and that's something that's I call a longer term game for longer term rewards. I think in this world today, you don't want to be on the employment side of the equation. You want to be on the equity or the capital side of the equation. You want to play games that compound over time. So what I found is that year by year, this compounds, right? You get invited to become a speaker, or you get invited to become a trainer, you get invited onto different, boards and so on, and over time people get to know you. But what was happening before was I wasn't anybody. If people asked me at a birthday party, "What did you do?" I was like, "I'm Ivan from X Bank," right?
Try,
That
try,
was my
yeah,
identity.
try telling people you're an auditor. That's what I used to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it wasn't the most popular party conversation, was it? Right, um, it but now you're your own brand, right? And you're compounding for your own thing, and it starts to build value for you over time. So each year, we had a fairly low expense rate the first year, but each year the income has compounded and grown in different ways that we never expected, and the portfolio career has worked out for us. We live intentionally, but we live well. You can live a lot when you're flexible. You can live a lot more cost effectively, right? I travel off peak most of the time. I've often pay a third of what people are paying when they go in the middle of August to the same place, right? Just as an example. So, and I don't have to spend all that money for the anesthesia that I used to spend trying to cover up for the stress and strain of working life.
Amazing. Ivan, you're an inspiration. The way you just described what you're doing now is a dream. You've basically taken your skill set, which was bound by corporate, and you're kind of a la carte picking your projects. And you talk about maybe not having the financial wealth that you had previously, but it sounds like you're still doing pretty well. And one of the problems that people have is they only measure wealth in terms of financials, but what about wealth in terms of your health, your emotion, your relationships? So yeah, how is your health, and how have your relationships with your close and connected people been ever since you've broken free?
Yeah, it's got to be one of the best payoffs, right? It's got to be one of the biggest rewards, particularly the relationships, the family side of things. And health wise, I describe, I often laugh to my wife and I giggle or something and I say, geez, I haven't felt stressed for like 3 years now.
Can I explain why I'm
I
laughing?
just don't
Can I
remember it.
can I explain why I just laughed when you said that? Because look, I used to be very highly strung, and I used to get stressed just like that, and I used to snap just like that. But through my kind of biohacking and the understanding of neuroscience and the triggers that give you your gut connection to your brain and where you can feel the stress coming, excuse me, I've managed to control those triggers so much now that I have my kids and my wife and my parents. They say to me now, "Well, aren't you going to get stressed?
They're waiting for it.
Why aren't you getting bothered?" And so I've almost gone way too this way, which is like, oh, it's all right. It's chilled out. So I need to now move up the stress curve a little bit just to show some interest in stuff. Yeah, sorry, Kat.
True, true. There's a good amount of motivation that's useful for life. I think when we were traveling around the world, I was truly chilled out guy. But I've got a little bit more motivated since. Um, I describe, my dream day, and at the beginning, my days were often quite like this. Now I've got a little bit more going on, but still a nice balance. But wake up, walk your daughter to school, and then go home. Watch the sun coming up in the morning, sit there, do, yoga or Pilates at home for 20 minutes or breathing exercises, and then read a book, and go with your wife for a nice lunch, or, not a luxurious, expensive lunch, but a healthy, nutritious, lunch you can enjoy with together with, the time. Time is the real value. Um, so my life is healthier, better sleep, better. I think mentally, I, I, I never read books. I was too busy. Now I read, right? Or at the beginning, I had so much time. I read, I think I must have read about 100 books that first year. Um, just sitting there at home reading, and then you're inputting into your brain, right? I think the problem with the corporate job I had was it was just stimulus response, stimulus response, stimulus response.
Yeah,
I had turned off my thinking. I wasn't
yeah,
exposing myself to new ideas. I wasn't challenging myself that much anymore. So I think mentally my mind is much healthier. The relationships, well, I mean, that, so we did 18 months, 24/7 together. My daughter was 5 years of age when we started. I think I have built up a bank with her, that's going to last me well, hopefully serve me well in the teenage years. There's something about being with your child 24/7. And, I taught her to read on the floor, in Vietnam in the afternoons. No teacher taught her to read. I taught her to read myself.
yeah,
There's these are the nice moments. And I treated our trip around the world like a little university of life. I was like, well, why is this country different to that country? Why does
yeah.
it work that way here? And that, I think, I feel there's a massive return on that. And time to, me and my wife have become sort of business partners of life, figuring out what's going on. It's a, with your spouse, working on anything together can be challenging. People always think, how do you possibly do it? But the fact that we talk so much, we think so much, we've grown closer together in terms of our mindset and our philosophies of life. Um, she's become more like me. I've become more like her. So yeah, there's huge return on it. But I'm just happier. People ask me, how am I doing now? I'm Irish, and we have this, English are about the same. We have this bad phrase, right, that I learned, as a kid. I'm not too bad. So my default is bad, but it's not that bad. So,
Mm,
it's such a negative way to respond. When people ask me now, I say I'm having fun, because I kind of
yeah,
consider life like a game now. I'm going to try and tick off as many fun things. So I wanted to write a book. I wrote a book. I wanted to become like a VC angel investor. I figured out, if you can do it, right? I remember once upon a time I bought a BMW, and I thought that would be cool and everybody would respect me, and nobody cared you had a BMW or not. But I was saying, you say you're an angel investor or a VC. People are like, ooh, that's cool. But it costs, my angel investing costs a lot less than the BMW costs. So, in Singapore, a BMW costs, $200,000 or $300,000 with the taxes. So, um, this is a much better investment in life, and it pays and compounds and teaches you things. So, I just find that I'm having a lot more fun now. Life is fuller. It feels like each month. Do you know the way we used to count down to the holidays, right?
yeah.
You wish away the week to the weekend, and you wished away the months to your next holiday. And that just is such a shame, right? Then I think there's a whole blank periods of my life where, those few years are just a blur. But now I'm
Mm.
doing new things, I'm trying new things, deliberately like to take on new challenges. Then life feels full. So I've discovered that's the secret of youth, right? You can make your life longer if you just stop living your life in the same routine of a Truman Show, every day the same, every day the same. That's the way to wish your life away. Start living differently and trying doing new things, then your life feels like one month can feel like 3 or 4 months used to feel like.
I'm going to send you a Let's Grow Young t-shirt because you've just basically advocated everything that I talk about. And Well, what's quite interesting in when you describe your new life is all the things you're doing are either free or they're inexpensive, right? You talked about watching the sunrise. I sit in the garden at 5 a.m., sometimes 6 a.m. My dog
Yeah,
comes out, and I have a number of books with me, and I just sit and I have my mushroom coffee, and my dog running around, and me just reading a book, and that's free. Um,
yeah,
I do loads of things that are just stimulus for the brain that don't cost anything. Reading books. You mentioned books. I see books as the ability to have a number of superpowers in your hands,
yeah.
and so I will read 3 or 4 books at a time, um, because it gives me stimulus angles that I can't get from elsewhere. And again, for people listening into this, I don't think Ivan's going on about doing anything really drastic here. There is a relationship with your corporate roles which have to be addressed, right? Otherwise, you just accept that that's the way it is. But if you can be brave enough to accept it and do something about it, the turbo power you're going to get through these sleep, nutrition, exercise community is going to be massive. And look, I'm still working in the corporate role. I'm not quite where you are at the moment, but my relationship with corporate in a different organization is very, very different. And so I think there's so much power in what you're saying. There's so much power in doing all the free stuff. Ivan, is there anything else that you would like to bring up while we've got you here? Is there anything else about your journey that we've not been on, and not talked about materially?
I just listening to what you said, I just feel passionate. I just have to repeat it, right? That there are so many more ways to live than people allow themselves to think.
Yeah,
I often say that we're prisoners in our own mind. We have created the prison that we must do it this way, this cannot be changed. But lifestyle design is actually there's infinite possibilities, right? If you decide I will, a good life to me is this and this, well then there's so many different ways of living that life. And as you said, right, I was talking to a coachee a few days ago, and he was saying exactly like you said. And he was saying just in the middle of the day, he just took a walk, he had a medical appointment, and he just watching the rest of the world hurrying around, but him just watching, life flow by was such a nice feeling. It was such a joy to just enjoy that walk and not have to be rushing and not to be thinking about what's on his to-do list and what he needed to do, and just to enjoy that. And so that people always think it's about money. It's not about money. The money is can flex in infinite different ways. I have people that I work with who've done it with lots, and there's people I've worked with who've done it with little, and I wouldn't say one is better than the other, and everybody can find their ways. Have friends who are living great lives, living in small little villas on the beach in very cheap locations, and working remotely part-time, and living an amazing life, and other people living in different ways. But yeah, just make sure that you're not tricking yourself or fooling yourself into thinking that you have no options when you do. If you're happy to stay, if it's a good place to be, I totally get that. I wouldn't want people to think that I'm saying everybody is stuck and everybody's miserable in the corporate world. No, but for me, I wanted something else and it wasn't working for me, and I'm glad that I've made the change. Most of the people I know are glad they made the change too. If you're one of those people who feels like you're stuck and you want to get out but you don't know how, I just want to say, that was what I felt I had to give back, was I had to go back and say to everybody, guys, I figured it out. I know there's a way. It can be done. Watch me, and let me show you what I did. It's not as hard and not as impossible as you think. And I've worked with so many people now. I've seen them do it in different ways that I've become so confident. Right, a couple of years, 4 years in on this journey, I'm much more confident than I ever was before, or even when I wrote the book, that it really is possible. There's so many paths. But sorry for my little soapbox there, Sanj.
No,
But
that
it
is
was
absolutely
steal
amazing.
it.
That's absolutely amazing. You've shed a few skins, and you've coming through with stronger, tougher, layers at the moment. And it reminds me of one small but important thing that I did, I remember going onto my LinkedIn profile, which was risk management professional, audit background, banking,
Yeah,
and I said, wow, I'm
scary.
actually going to change it now. So I decided to put me in my LinkedIn profile. So I ended up saying, I've changed everything. It says, I think it says YouTube channel host, longevity advisor, and then towards the end it says property investor and banking executive, and that was actually quite important to me. That was
Very
me
important.
sending the signal out to people to say the transformation is taking place, right? But that was something small but important, and I think when you give yourself those kind of signals, it's quite important because for me it was like this is that alternative path coming much more closer into my corporate world now and much more aligned, and so yeah, that was an important moment. Have you had similar moments where you've kind of publicly had to change a few things to say, well, that was the old Ivan, this is the new one?
Yeah, the identity thing is huge actually with everybody that I work with. It's and certainly for myself, right? You became your identity became your role and your job, and we wore that like a little comfort blanket that, you know, everybody's simple and easy. You say you're from a big company and you do some, do a job that sounds good. I think many of us end up living our lives for the approval or the validation of everyone around us, thinking that that's an acceptable life path and we did well and we're successful. It's uncomfortable, it's scary for sure to leave that comfort blanket behind, to unwrap that identity and try to put yourself out there and say, who am I? Because really it's no way to live your life, your precious life, to say that you're a brand, that a brand that would fire you tomorrow and wouldn't, a month later no one will even remember that you were there, really, right? So that identity thing is tough. I remember, thinking out what did I do. I was retired for a while. I was author for a while. I was, and then, you know, I decided to, a bit like you, a moment comes when you're just like, okay, look, I'm going to embrace it. Freedom lifestyle designer. People, some people message me like, are you crazy? No one will ever want to hire you ever again. And I said, okay, I'm okay with that. Um, but actually, I realized that I was never the life of any party. I was never the person that people particularly, talked about or wanted to talk about. But a year or so after I made this change and had this label out there, I realized actually people were reaching out to me. Like you said, people were reaching out and, hey, let's meet up. And people who, they weren't even necessarily, you didn't think of them as friends before, but now they were like, hey, buddy, yeah, let's talk. I'm so curious about what you're doing. You actually became much more interesting once you left behind that security blanket. I find I have much more interesting things to say, and people are much more interested to talk to a freedom lifestyle designer than they were to talk to a banker before. Sounds obvious now, but I was deathly scared that the world couldn't accept it and would have no interest. And I see the
Amazing.
same with all the people I work with every day.
Amazing. Well, Ivan, I'm doing a seminar in London online, to a number of people just before the new year, and you and I one day in Asia Pacific are going to do a seminar together. And
Let's do it.
and
It'll
if
be fun.
and the aim is, look, to be honest, I've worked with such wonderful people, even in the organisation where we took on a lot of shit and a lot of stress, and I just know that people are not bringing their authentic selves. They're not confident in trying to break through whatever perceptions they have to act. And I really want to help them. I really want to help them. And I don't want them to think the only alternative is to walk out the door and, default on your mortgage payment, default on your kids' private school fees. There are other options. And I think
Mm.
that is a really powerful message you've given. And, let's continue to help people. And it's been wonderful having you on. Um, be, Before we kind of call it a day with this one, and it is just a day for today because I'm sure we're going to have you on again. Um, how do people get hold of you? You talked about your book. Um, I think people will want to know more about you. How do they get hold of your book? How do they get hold of you as a coach? And how do they contact you?
Yeah, so I've still, given the space that we talked about, I'm still mostly on LinkedIn. So if you look for me, Ivan McAdam O'Connell, or Freedom Lifestyle Designer on LinkedIn. The book is called Live Big, Break Free, Lifestyle Freedom. So they can find it on Amazon, but the link is on my LinkedIn page. Is probably the easiest way to find me. But of course, livebreakfree.com is the website as well if people want to go there.
Amazing. Ivan, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed that conversation. I hope you have too.
Me too, definitely.